And so I'd like to talk to you about 3 stories that have a little bit of a haunted tale to it, but they're also historical. So first up, let me look at my card real quick so I get the details right. Okay. First up, we're going to talk about the Silver Reef mining incident, which happened back in 1880. So if you're all ready, we can start there. Okay, awesome. So Tom Forrest was a miner who came in from Scotland in 1880 and ended up in Silver Reef. He was a bad drunk who had a really bad temper. And he kind of messed around on the mining job quite a bit. So the foreman for the Stormont Mining Company decided he had to go. And that name, the man's name is Michael Carvis. So he ends up firing Tom Forrest, and Tom doesn't like that. He's hollering that he's going to kill Michael Carvis. And most of the miners just thinking he's blowing hot air. There's no real, threat behind that. And a couple days later, he gets to drinking, Tom does, and he's against the boarding house in Silver Reef and sees Michael Carvis coming down the way. So he reaches out to try to grab Michael Carvis to talk to him. And Michael dodges him, kind of steps back. Well, that kind of angers Forrest. So he reaches underneath his coat, draws his Bowie knife, and plunges it right into Michael Carvis's chest. As soon as he realizes what he's done, he's off into the mines. He's got to go hide, because there's not much places to go there except for leads, and that's teeming with people. So he runs up into the mines. There's miners coming out of the old Elkhorn Saloon, which is a place that's notorious for shootouts. And they see him drop into the ground. They run over, they grab him, and they're taking him back home. The doc's coming in. Michael Carvis is surrounded by his wife and his 6 children, but there's nothing the doc can do. He's going to be dying pretty soon. So the sheriff comes over, kind of sees Michael Carvis pass, and decides, we need to get the posse together, and we need to go find Tom Forrest up in the mines. So him and a bunch of other guys start looking through all the mines in Silver Reef for Tom Forrest, and it takes them about 12 hours before they finally find him in an abandoned mine shaft. They drag him out. By this point, it's morning. Everybody's really tired, and they throw him in the Silver Reef jail. Yeah, no problem.
It's the ghost of Carvis here, not
Yeah, it's the ghost of Michael Carvis.
Wait a minute, I'm getting rid of this, Oh, damn me, what am I doing here? Okay, keep going, I think I got it still here.
All right, no problem. So they throw Tom Forrest into the Silver Reef jail. And the deputy's standing guard, and Michael Carvis' son, who's also named Michael Carvis, shows up with a pistol in hand and vengeance on his mind. He's going to kill Tom Forrest for killing his father. And the sheriff kind of runs over as he sees him approaching, and him and the deputy talk the son, Michael Carvis, down from killing him. But the sheriff knows that Michael's not the only one who's going to be wanting his blood, because the original Michael Carvis, he's now deceased, was a really good foreman, and the miners of Silver Reef are really annoyed about the killing. Like, they're drinking, they're getting angry, they're wanting to do a mob to kill Tom Forrest. So the sheriff and the deputy get together, and they transport Tom Forrest down to the old St. George jail to get him out of there. Well, Michael Carvis is laid to rest later that night in a grave, and the miners start drinking over the old Elkhorn Saloon, and they start getting to talking. It's not right that Michael Carvis is dead when Tom Forrest is still alive. So, liquored up, they get their saddles on their horses, and they go riding into St. George. But it's evening, so they don't get there until about 2 o'clock in the morning. And as they get to the old St. George jail, it's locked up. They can't get to Tom Forrest, and Tom's panicking because they're surrounding the jail. 50 yards down the way, though, the sheriff, I forget his name, Sheriff Hardy's house. I've been to the house before. It's just right next to the jail. So they're going down and banging on Sheriff Hardy's door, telling him to come down and give him the keys. So he wakes up, he comes downstairs, and he refuses to open the door and refuses to give any of them the keys, because he doesn't want Tom Forrest to die before he can get a trial. In the confusion and in the hammering, somebody fires off a round in Sheriff Hardy's door. And that causes the sheriff to back up from the door. The mob breaks in, grabs the keys off the sheriff, runs over to the jail, unlocks the door, and pulls Tom Forrest out. So they're all aching for blood. They grab a rope, they make a rudimentary noose, they drag them over to a telegraph pole, string them up on the telegraph pole, but that's not rated for human bodies, and it snaps in half, causing them to pitch right into the dirt. So Tom Forrest is pleading with them, please don't kill me, and the mob's not listening. They need something stronger than a telegraph pole, so they take him, they drag him 2 blocks over to where there's a big cottonwood tree in front of a house. They string him up on one of the branches of the cottonwood tree, and he's kicking, and he's trying to plead with them, and they finally lift him up off the ground, and it takes several minutes before he's dead. By this point, the sheriff has rounded up a bunch of people and come over to disperse the mob and to try to save Tom Forrest, but Tom Forrest has already passed. So they give the keys back to the sheriff. The mob goes back to Silver Reef. They cut Tom Forrest's body down and put him in an unmarked grave in the Pioneer Cemetery. And it's kind of interesting because ever since then, it was mid-October, and mid-October nights, every once in a while, people will say that they see a guy walking around the cemetery with a noose around his neck just for a couple seconds until he disappears. But that door that was shot at the sheriff's house is actually inside the old St. George jail right now with a bullet hole in it. There's a ghost tours company that owns that, and I've been on that tour and I've seen that. But that's the story of the Silver Reef Miners, Tom Hardy, Tom Hardy's an actor. Tom Forrest, thank you. Tom Forrest and his death. Yeah, Michael Carvis was the one who died.
Now, where is Silver Reef in relation to St. George?
So if you go up I-15, Silver Reef is right next to Leeds, if you know where Leeds is at. Okay, so I live in Leeds, and that's about 20 miles north of here. So it's before the interchange to go out to Tokerville. And then Leeds is, so you go up through Leeds, and Silver Reef is on the west side towards Pine Mountain. And it was an old mining community. It was the only place in Utah, and pretty much the west, where they had silver in the old coral reefs. And they had a whole bunch of mines out there. And it was
in a coral reef?
Yeah, in coral reef. It was kind of an interesting geologic thing. Nobody really knows how it got there. And it was a boom for about 20 years until it all dried up in the early 1900s. So that's the first story I had to tell you about that.
Okay.
So the second one is about, excuse me, the Bigelow Tunnel.
What tunnel?
The Bigelow Tunnel. So how long have you been down here in St. George?
3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months? Okay, so before I-15 was finished in the 1960s, there was only one real direct route between St. George and Washington, and that was on the old Highway 91, or also known as the Arrowhead Highway. And there's a tunnel right where the cut is in I-15 now, just a little bit further west of that went underneath the mountain. It's a 500-foot tunnel, rock cut walls, and everything called Bigelow Tunnel. So that keeps popping. It was named after Charles Bigelow, the man who actually pioneered the route in the 1920s from Salt Lake to Los Angeles, which later became Highway 91, which I-15 follows a lot of. And the Bigelow Tunnel was pretty narrow. It was only about 20 feet wide, so you could only get like 2 Model Ts through it at the beginning, and then later on, when I-15 was done, they closed down the tunnel in 1970, thereabouts. But it was the main area for traffic from Salt Lake to Los Angeles through Washington and St. George. And in the late 1960s, about 1967, there's a trooper named Ken Randall. He's in St. George. And he gets a call one night that there's been a crash in Bigelow Tunnel. So he drives over from the St. George Police Department over to the tunnel. And as he gets there, there's a car that looks like it swerved and then ended up hitting the side of the tunnel and turning over and killing all 4 occupants. So they've got to call in an ambulance. It takes them several hours to clean up everything. They take the bodies over to St. George morgue, and he's basically on shift that night up until well after sunrise. And then everything gets cleaned up, the tunnel reopens, so traffic can resume as normal. And then about a week later, there's another call that comes out to the police station that there was another crash in Bigelow Tunnel.
This is 67.
Yeah, about 67. And so there's another crash in the Bigelow Tunnel, and Tom was the other guy. Ken Randall is on station again. So he drives out to the Bigelow Tunnel once more, expecting another crash. But there's nothing there. He drives through the tunnel. It's only about 500 feet long. there's nothing going on. So he parks on the Washington side of the tunnel with his headlights facing down towards the St. George side. He grabs his flashlight and he's walking down the tunnel just to make sure that there's nothing that happened, because it's, you know, really narrow and he couldn't quite see very well with just his headlights. Gets all the way to the St. George side and there's nothing going on. So he figures, all right, I'll just head on back to my police car. So he turns around and starts walking back, and all of a sudden headlights flare right behind him. And there's an engine roaring and there's tires squealing as if they're trying to slam on his brakes. He panics and he throws himself backwards against the rough wall of the tunnel, which is digging into his back. And he sees his headlights coming directly for him. He throws his hands up and the flashlight up, trying to block his face. And all of a sudden the headlights disappear. And there's nothing there. And the tunnel is super cold, like cold enough to see his breath when it wasn't cold. He panics, he runs back to his squad car, gets in it, and drives the long way, which was around Four Master Drive, and about 10 miles to get back into St. George instead of going just through the tunnel. Doesn't say anything about it for a while. Kind of finishes out the shift, goes home, and then about another week later, another call comes in that there's been another crash in the tunnel at night. He's not going to go on this one. So they send one of the other troopers out. Trooper goes out, nothing's happening. The tunnel's completely clear. So he figures, okay, it's probably this mysterious caller calling in again. It's another ghost car or something like that. But nobody else ever saw the car except for Ken Randall. But on October 13th, up until the tunnel closed in 1970, they kept getting a call that there's a crash in the tunnel. And of course they have to go investigate it, but there was never another crash in the tunnel.
Was 13th the day of the first crash?
Yes. Yeah, 13th was the day of the first crash. And that Bigelow tunnel is still there. Right now it's a construction company that owns it and uses it for construction storage. And I've been up to it. You can't really go into it because they've got it all blocked off. But it's kind of an interesting thing to see, but I didn't hear anything there. I didn't see anything there.
Is that up by Red Hills Drive?
Yeah, right above that.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's set up against the wall, and you can see it's kind of like a concrete base on one side and then on the other, kind of almost tannish because it's been reddened over the years.
I thought it was a railroad tunnel when I saw it.
Yeah, no, that was the only way through for Highway 91 through there. Like, you could go around Four Master, but it was like 10 miles out of your way, and so it was the most direct route to go through there at the time. But yeah, the tunnel still exists, and you know, it was one of the ghost stories that I thought was pretty interesting about this place. So I do have one last one to tell y'all, and this one I think is the most important.
Wow.
You ever heard of Mountain Meadows Massacre?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
What was it? Who was it? Parley Pratt or somebody? I forget who was supposed to have done all that. Or
Well, Parley Pratt's part of it, but only indirectly. So 1857, Parley P. Pratt was proselytizing in Arkansas and ended up getting murdered near Alma, Arkansas. And that was in May. Word got back to the Utah Territory, and the Mormons were not happy about that. Obviously, one of their church leaders had gotten murdered. About July, another group of settlers called the Baker Rancher Wagon Train from Arkansas comes up to Salt Lake City. And at this point, there was a lot of tension between the federal government and the Mormons, which was resulting in what was now known as the Utah War, in that the federal government was trying to deal with the Mormon problem as they saw it. 1857, yeah. So in July, the Baker Rancher Company ends up in Salt Lake City trying to buy provisions, and they tell them you got to move on. They don't want anything to do with them. They don't want them there at all. So they go down the Old Mormon Trail, the Old Mormon Road, which goes from Salt Lake City down to Beaver and then down to Cedar City, and then part of it cuts down here to St. George, but the other part of it goes over into Nevada and California. And the Baker Rancher Company was heading to California. And they get down to Beaver, and they won't give them any provisions there. They tell them you got to keep on moving on. So they get down to Cedar City. They're able to trade a little bit at Cedar City for provisions, but the people there still don't really want them around, so they kind of push them out. After the Baker Rancher Company leaves Cedar City, a dispatch rider comes up from Beaver with rumors about the Arkansas settlers, saying that they'd gotten into some fights, they'd stolen some cattle from the Mormons up north. Now, we don't know if these rumors are true or not, But that's what they were telling the people in Cedar City. And there was also speculation that they might be gathering information for the federal government and spying on the Mormons as they were passing through Mormon territory to give to the Union soldiers later on. So, yeah, there's a whole to-do about that. Anyways, John D. Lee, who was the leader of the Mormon militia contingent in Cedar City, decides he's not having any of that. They need to go confront these settlers about it. So he gathers up together the Mormon militia in Cedar City and decides that they're going to go head them off. But he also sends some of his men to go up to the local Paiutes who they're friendly with and ask them if they'll aid them in the raid that's going to come up. So Baker Rancher Company ends up in a little place called Mountain Meadows, which is an idyllic pasture land to basically water your horses and you know, get food and grass for them before making the crossing over into Nevada and California. I know it's part of the old Spanish Trail too, so it's been used for hundreds of years. And I've been up to the site. It's quite tranquil. It's a really nice little place that has an eerie vibe to it now. I don't know if it did back then, but obviously we're getting to that. So John D. Lee and his group end up showing up, but they see the Baker Rancher Company camped out, and they decide they're going to disguise themselves as Paiutes to conduct this raid, because they don't want them knowing that they're the Mormons that are going to be attacking them. So they strip off most of their clothes, kind of paint themselves up, and start riding on their horses, hooting and hollering and firing at them. Well, the Baker Rancher Company thinks they're under attack from Paiutes, so they start circling the wagons, and this raid lasts up into the evening when the actual Paiutes show up and start joining them on it. And it took 5 days of siege, where every single day they come riding around the wagons, shooting at them, hooting and hollering and everything. And this started on the 7th of September, 1857, and went until the 11th of September, 1857. And by the 11th, the Baker Rancher Company were running really low on supplies. They didn't really have much left, and John D. Lee, dressed as a Mormon this time, approaches them with a white flag, telling them that they can do something about the Paiutes that have been attacking for the past 5 days. But the Paiutes want all their guns, they want all their wagons, they want all their gear, and they want all their livestock. So they're going to have to give all of that up, and then they'll give them safe passage back to Cedar City. Well, the settlers didn't really have a choice. They kind of had to capitulate, and they kind of had to go back to Cedar City at this point. So they agreed to it. They leave all their equipment and everything at their wagons. The Mormons come down, separate the men, women, and children, and kind of lead them off. Just up over the ridge, they have another contingent of Mormon and Paiutes waiting. And as they're walking these people up over the ridge, that contingent jumps up and charges them and starts slaughtering them with rifle, with pistol, with axe, and with hammers. And they kill every single one of them, which is over 120 people, except for all the children under 6 years of age, which is about 17 of them. So they just absolutely slaughter everybody. The Paiutes get their share out of the raid. They take a lot of livestock, they take some of the wagons and some of the guns. The rest of it is taken back to Cedar City. The children, who are the survivors, are distributed amongst the Mormon families, some as far north as Salt Lake City. And it took a very long time before any investigation could happen, because it took over a year for the word of the massacre to get back east to the Union soldiers. But the problem with it was within like a year is when the Civil War started really kicking off, like tensions and everything. Like Fort Sumter wasn't until 1863, 1862, something like that. But the investigation was delayed until 1874. And so it took 3 years of investigation to figure out what exactly had happened, where the bodies were buried, and they were all buried in a mass grave. Afterwards, initially they were left for all the crows and everything to get to them. So after 3 years of investigation, they find all the children. They give them the option to go back to Arkansas to extended family, or to stay with the Mormons, or to be relocated to California. Some of them end up staying with the Mormons because they were so young, and they've been with them for 17 years. That's all they know. Others go back to Arkansas, and some go to California. The only person that was ever convicted in the entire raid was John D. Lee, the guy who instigated it. He was executed in 1877 by U.S. Army soldiers of the firing squad. But that's Mountain Meadows Massacre. And that's one of the worst tragedies that ever happened in the southern U.S.
So where's the ghost story?
Well, the ghost story is when you go up to the Mountain Meadows site on the evenings. A lot of people have reported, and I've been up there evenings too, I haven't heard it, but other people have said that they can hear the screams of the women and children as they're being butchered.
I've heard it.
You've heard it?
I've heard it.
Okay, yeah, so I've known a couple other people too who said that they've heard it.
Mhm.
And I've only been up there a couple times in the evenings, typically I'm up there during the
Yeah.
daytime. But yeah, it's a place that's got a lot of eerie feel to it.
Yeah, the air is very heavy there.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is very heavy.
Yes.